name is Dylcia Pagan. I'm one of the former Puerto Rican political prisoners that was released on September 10th, 1999 after serving 20 years, charged with seditious conspiracy by the United States government for fighting for the freedom of my country, Puerto Rico. I was born October 15th, 1946 at the former controversial Lincoln Hospital. In 1947, my parents decided to leave Freeman Street in the Bronx and move to El Barrio, East Harlem. This is my neighborhood. This is where I was raised. This is where I was loved, kindred, and learned the reality of life. Welcome to my world. I'm sitting on the steps of St. Cecilia's Church. For 8 years, I walked up and down these steps because I had to go to Mass. I was a student at St. Cecilia's Elementary School. I attended St. Cecilia's for 8 years. I made my first communion, my confirmation, my 8th grade graduation, and filmed my first film on spiritualism inside this church. St. Cecilia's was part of all my years of upbringing in El Barrio, East Harlem. You know, I had difficult experiences here in St. Cecilia's because in 1952, I was probably the first Puerto Rican child on a television show on NBC titled The Children's Hour. Everybody would call it the Horton Hardart Show. My dance teacher, Helen Butleroff, asked my mother if I could join her school, and I became a dancer. A year and a half later, the producer, Alice Clements, asked me if I would learn a script, and I said, of course. So I became Maribone, the Talking Dogs, played me. Well, going to St. Cecilia's wasn't easy, because the nuns really attempted to humiliate me because I was a Puerto Rican child that spoke both languages and happened to be on a program on television on NBC. So my mother was my warrior. She was here as a substitute teacher to guarantee that her child was not messed with by the nuns. She always told me, and my father as well, that nuns weren't gods, that whenever I had questions to ask, I should feel free to ask. And believe me, I'd asked a lot of questions. We're standing in front of my former residence, where I started my community activism in this community, East Harlem and Barrio. I was a young organizer in the mid-60s, the anti-poverty programs. I became a researcher, an investigator, an evaluator for the Community Development Agency. And in this home, many of the artists came together. We created a collective called Rican Artists Guild. It was the collective of writers, poets, aspiring filmmakers, and from there emerged a collective work in the area of media. My activism has always centered around how does one change our community? How do we make this a better community for Puerto Ricans and all people of color that have been residents in this community? I was taught that by my parents. It has never been an easy role, but I find that to be an activist, one has to have an ideal, a commitment to struggle, and a commitment to change. And the change that occurred between the 70s to the 80s, even till today, even though this community today is totally gentrified, it still has been able to maintain its Puerto Rican essence, its Puerto Rican culture, and a conglomeration of Puerto Ricans that still fight to maintain this, a Puerto Rican El Barrio, for our people. There's always this bridge between Puerto Rico and El Barrio. My family from Guanica and Yauco lived on 110th and 111th Street in Madison Avenue. Some of my father's family lived on 108th Street. And then there were the social clubs. So all the social clubs celebrated Puerto Rican festivities, American holidays, and because I was a TV star, child star, I had to perform at all these activities. This gave me a feeling of who I am, a feeling of my essence as a Puerto Rican woman, a feeling of knowing that somewhere or another, change had to occur in this community. El Barrio will always be El Barrio. It will always be the heartland of the Puerto Ricans of New York City. El Barrio is my hometown. It's my roots. And it's a place where I learned to love my nation and love my people and create change. The building behind us is the infamous People's Church that was taken over by the Young Lords Party and community activists like myself in 1971. This building was taken over for 11 days. Why? Because we wanted this church to service this community. This church was closed down to only one activity every Sunday. But then, after the 11 days, we created free breakfast programs, clothing drives, and every day there was an activity teaching our community kids the Puerto Rican culture and the culture of struggle. We celebrated New Year's Eve, where Pedro Pietri read the Puerto Rican obituary for the second time in his career. Artists like Sandra Maria Esteves, Papoleto Melendez, Jose Angel Figueroa, all of our Puerto Rican artists, Ray Barreto, Willie Colon, showed up here. And one of our legal advisors was Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo Rivera and I became friends, and we got to establish a friendship and a working relationship. It was in this church where a new path for Puerto Rican culture was created in 1971. Till today, the friendships that were created here and the conscience of struggle continues in all of the work that leads towards the liberation of our homeland, Puerto Rico. Viva Puerto Rico libre. Pa'lante with the young lords. My community activism was like the lead into working in community activism in the arts. In the mid-60s, we realized that the image of Puerto Ricans was really negative. So we established a group called the Puerto Rican Media Education and Education Council, Action Council. What we did was we studied the view of the Puerto Rican, the vision that the media was projecting on Puerto Ricans. We hired college students to do a 6-month data collection every day of the media. And the end result was there were no positive images about Puerto Ricans. Because of the black movement and the black activists, precedents have been set to create a demand to the networks. So we created, literally, what we did was we filed lawsuits against all the networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, and PBS. And at that time, what we required was that the presidents of the network come to our community to discuss our demands. It was an interesting exchange, but nothing came to be. The networks never responded. One afternoon, we were having a meeting, and we decided that the best thing to do was to take over the PBS telethon. So we organized a mass demonstration. About 300 to 500 people showed up. 11 of us walked in to the telethon. Peary Thomas was then living in New York, so Peary was part of our team. We walked in, took over the telethon, and that is where the first Puerto Rican television in the history of the United States gave birth, titled Realidades. I became the first Puerto Rican television producer of a series called Realidades and the associate producer of the entire series. We were able to create programming of music, of dance, of cultural events, and political history of the whole Puerto Rican question on the island and the diaspora. That led to a national series. I then went to Boston to do a national series called The Infinity Factory about mathematics, dealing with mathophobia. Came back to New York, was the editor of the first bilingual newspaper, created a gossip column, and then worked for NBCBS at a program called Channel to the People. My career in the media was really faceted around creating positive images of our people.